November 19, 1998. In the bowels of an SCP Foundation containment facility, a low-level Foundation clerk wheels a covered gurney towards a testing lab. He doesn't even know what he's transporting, just that it's something extremely important and somehow related to a dangerous uncontained anomaly. He leaves the gurney in the lab as a pair of scientists give him a silent nod. The clerk has survived this long with Level 2 clearance thanks to his ability to keep his head down. He doesn't intend to compromise his track record by changing that attitude now. The clerk leaves without a word, and the scientists get to work. One of them removes the cover over the gurney to see the highly classified item underneath. A McRib, a famous limited edition McDonald's menu item that somehow turned the lowest quality pork available into a much desired big-ticket item. It's a heavy hitter for the company's seasonal menu, appearing for brief, tantalizing periods before being yanked off the market again to build anticipation for its next appearance. To the untrained eye, there is nothing differentiating this from a regular McRib. It's not even any more caustic to human health than the non-anomalous variant. The biggest difference is that this McRib, rather than the aforementioned low-quality pork, is made out of 89% human flesh. And the most frightening part? This is far from the most bizarre element of this particular anomaly. The scientists already know that what they're dealing with here is a human McRib. That much isn't in question. What they want to find out is who this particular McRib is made out of. It doesn't take them long to discover that it's yet another chilling data point in a terrifying pattern. The burger is made from the flesh of someone who disappeared under violent and mysterious circumstances, just like all the others. In this case, Emma Richards, a 34-year-old woman who disappeared from her home earlier that summer. According to those who knew her, it was as though she'd just up and left one day, offering no reason why. That wasn't like her at all. As they work, the scientists determine the meat in the McRib seems to have been extracted from her belly and thigh. In January of 1999, these same scientists will test another McRib, only to find it perfectly matches the DNA of another person who went missing under extremely mysterious circumstances. Tony Michaels, a man in his 40s, at first thought to have been killed in a drunk driving accident, but his body was never found at the scene. Instead, flesh from his cheek and shoulder somehow made it into the sandwich. In November of that same year, these scientists will also, regrettably, get an answer to the question of what happened to Amy Baker. Her parents had left her at home the previous month, where she'd gone missing in what was believed to be a home invasion and kidnapping scenario. Her parents will never be able to give her a proper burial. The meat in the sandwich appears to have been sourced from eyes and hands. What's going on here? Is this some international conspiracy that goes right to the heart of McDonald's corporate headquarters? Thankfully, no. In fact, it didn't take the Foundation long to realize that all of this madness is centered around one very specific location, the local McDonald's franchise in Martindale, Indiana. And this isn't as simple as some mad cannibalistic serial killer who also happens to be a McDonald's line cook. Nobody knows what process causes the meat to be infused with human flesh. The meat that's delivered to the restaurant is non-anomalous, low-end pork. At some point during the cooking process, this is replaced or transformed into the meat of these missing people, and even the Foundation can't figure out when, how, or why. But it isn't the Foundation that begins this investigation, nor another investigative group of interest like the Global Occult Coalition or even law enforcement. It's a local journalist named Christian Curtis, an investigative reporter for the Indianapolis Star, whose beat involves taking down local businesses with a tendency towards screwing over their customers. Back in 1997, he's working on a groundbreaking piece about local restaurants and grocers skirting food safety regulations. And it's during this little campaign that he first finds out about the McRib. He receives a tip from an anonymous concerned citizen who said of the McRib at the local McDonald's, quote, "Meat is gamey and unnaturally flavorful, feels off somehow. Texture is very unusual, too soft for pork, but with a queer firmness upon biting. Rib sauce is bitter and tastes heavily of iron, maybe spoiled." With a hot tip like that, Curtis can hardly resist getting involved. He visits the McDonald's branch, pretending to be just another customer, and at face value, there doesn't appear to be anything out of the ordinary. The customer seems satisfied and the staff seems clean, professional, and attentive, but that doesn't mean the story isn't worth following through on. After all, One of the things you learn as an investigative reporter is that appearances can be deceiving. Curtis orders a McRib and leaves, taking samples to send to a local food testing lab, who find that the composition of the meat is highly unusual, though they never even begin to expect that they're dealing with human flesh. Before the article can even be published, the suspected health code violation gets the city council and even the local police involved. Before you can say salmonella, the city health inspector has shut down the Martindale McDonald's location until the investigation can be properly conducted. It seems almost like this is a situation that takes care of itself without the SCP Foundation even getting involved. An anomalous McDonald's location is serving human flesh, and the health inspector shuts it down. But sadly, this isn't the end of the matter. It's just the beginning. On October 29, 1997, 4 days after the city closes the McDonald's, something extremely strange starts to happen. Local police are called in after a large and seemingly rowdy crowd gathers outside the closed Martindale McDonald's location, angry and confused about the closure of their favorite restaurant in town, especially during McRib season. When some local cops are dispatched to contain the incident, they almost find themselves overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the McRib-loving citizens. The official police report on the matter reads, "Crowd was unhappy and unsatisfied with any reason given as to why the McDonald's had been closed. Several individuals approached the perimeter to ask when it would be reopened and, when told there was no definite date, became agitated and requested permission to cross the perimeter to make a sandwich for themselves. These individuals were persistent, unwilling to take no for an answer, and on several occasions had to be pulled back away from the building where they had crossed the line. This continued for several hours until sheriff's deputies arrived to help disperse the crowd. It would seem almost too far-fetched to be true if it wasn't for multiple reliable eyewitness reports to corroborate the details. Another one of the officers in attendance, Mr. Sam Hill, added this to the official record. "They were insatiable. I kept trying to tell them that they couldn't go in, that the meat was spoiled, and that there were health concerns involved, but it was like they couldn't hear what I was saying. They didn't even look at me. They just stared straight past us and towards the building. One woman I had to restrain and pull back out, and the entire time she kept repeating, 'I just need a taste. Give me a taste. I just want a taste.' Same thing with Officer Derry when he got there from county. It was like they were transfixed. No amount of explaining what was happening made a difference with them." Thankfully, the first responders are able to get the crowd to reluctantly disperse without resorting to more severe crowd control measures, but there's a strange sense of foreboding in the air. The feeling that nothing was solved here, and that the can has just been kicked further down the road for some awful yet inevitable outcome still to come. Not a word is exchanged on the matter, but everyone there knows it. And that's why a detail of 10 officers is placed around the McDonald's that night, hoping to head off the fears that the same group of embittered locals might return and break in. The leader of the group, Officer Jeff Moore, already somehow has this creeping sense that 10 won't be enough to hold off whatever's coming, but he doesn't want to look weak in the line of duty. This will cost him and all the others dearly. The Martindale, Indiana McDonald's is on the edge of town, bordered on 3 sides by a relatively dense thicket of trees. A single road leads towards the McDonald's itself. It's the kind of place you might see in the dead of night while driving from one town to another, the faint glow of the golden arches peeking out above the tree line. The kind of place that makes you think, wow, they'll put a McDonald's anywhere, huh? As the hours creep on, night starts to fall. 7 of the officers stand outside, armed with little more than the pistols holstered at their hips. On the inside, Officer Moore and 2 others wait, forming a kind of rudimentary command center. Perhaps it's the boredom and the growing dark causing their eyes to play tricks on them, but Moore and the others can swear that he sees people moving amongst the trees. Or at least, he's pretty sure those are people. It's hard to make out other than some shadowy figures that dart from trunk to trunk. Only a couple at first, but then more and more and more. What could they be planning out there? He tries his best to keep observing without losing his nerve. But as the figures in the woods seem to multiply, that's getting harder and harder to achieve. And when Moore and the others hear a loud, wet thud against the side of the building, their hearts nearly leap out of their throats in shock. But they're on the clock, and that means they have to investigate no matter how scared they are. As Moore investigates, the sense of unease grows. Something's wrong. He knows he should act on his growing suspicions and start calling it all into the station. He starts to radio in, But before he can say anything, he's interrupted by the sounds of panicked shouting from the officers on the other side of the McDonald's, and soon, that shouting is underscored by a smattering of gunfire and screams. Moore draws his own handgun and tries to stop his hands from shaking as he runs back through the restaurant to look out the window and see what the hell is going on here. And what he sees out of that window is something straight out of a nightmare. It's the customers. The same people who had been crowding outside the store earlier, demanding to be let in, demanding their precious McRibs on pain of an uprising. They're running out of the tree line, yelling and snarling. But it's not just that. They're different. Moore thinks they must all be wearing hats at first, elaborate headdresses with large, ceremonial antlers, like the kind you see on a stag. But no, that's not it. That's not it at all. Those antlers are growing right out of their skulls, just like the jagged rows of fangs in their jaws and the long, serrated claws where their fingernails should be. They shrug off the gunshots being unleashed against them as they set upon the assembled guards, biting, clawing, chewing. Moore has never been so afraid in his life as he watches his fellow officers fall to the hungry tide, crashing against them. Should he shoot? Should he run? Would either option help him anymore? Moore tries to gibber a plea for help into the phone, incoherently babbling about how he and his men are being attacked and killed. As the front doors smash open and the customers lunge for him, all that Moore can choke out into the phone is, "They're not people." After the monstrous Martindale McDonald's massacre, the SCP Foundation enters our story at long last. It isn't every day that something emerges from the woods and effortlessly slaughters 10 cops. Foundation field agents embedded in regional law enforcement quickly nip any further police involvement in the bud and pass the assignment up the chain. Within the hour, a Foundation cleanup crew led by Agent John Freeman arrives on the scene, hoping to get everything under control and potentially treat and debrief survivors. But not only are there no survivors, there are barely even any bodies, mainly just skeletons, loosely draped with the police uniforms they wore in life, eaten all the way down to the bone by their ravenous assailants. Even the cleanup crew, who, as you can probably imagine, have seen some truly horrifying things on the job, can't hide their disgust at what they're seeing here. The only other evidence, in addition to the bodies, are the words, "Reopen tomorrow," scrawled across the nearby sidewalk in blood. It's a devotion to the McDonald's cause that not even Ronald himself could be expected to muster. Before undergoing voluntary amnestic treatment to scrub some of the more unpleasant edges of this particular memory out of his mind, Agent Freeman gave a detailed and extremely unsettling statement on what he'd witnessed that fateful night. What was immediately apparent was the power dynamic between the attackers and their targets. The officers killed were not men with guns. They were prey animals at the mercy of a carnivorous host. There was no law of engagement between the two. Most were rendered unrecognizable, aside from that which could not be consumed. Badges and weapons were left untouched, but the soft meat of the body was picked apart like carrion. Throughout the entire night, we were being watched. They had already had their fill, but the most impassioned among them still demanded our attention. They stayed at the tree line, just far enough away that we couldn't see their gnarled and broken faces, but could still make out the long and twisting antlers extending out of their scalps in the moonlight. They wanted us to know that they knew. But then it's no different than when any access to food is removed from a group that depends on it. Remove a population of deer, and the wolves begin to starve, and then their behavior changes. They've certainly been here far longer than we have. It's not unexpected that they would have found a way to simplify the process of gathering food the same way we have. How are their actions any different than our own? Reducing animals to neatly packaged meat discs to be sold to the public for just a single $1 or less. Only real distinction here is that we're the meat. One of them was standing in the shadows near my car when I went to leave. It was an enormous thing, stretched unnaturally thin and wretched, shuddering and shaking like each breath was the death rattle of every living being around it. Flesh changers aren't something I'm unfamiliar with, and this wasn't the first time I'd seen their work, but never had I been so close to one. I asked it what it wanted from us, why they had killed those men, though we both knew that I understood it perfectly clear. And in that moment, I had never been so small in my entire life. Despite all my experiences, a life lived fully and whatever else I had to offer still ahead of me, in that moment, I was a convenient tube of packaged meat, neatly tucked away until such time as it was needed. When it answered, its voice was like dry wind over an empty field. It said 6 words before it melted back into the dark.
Reopen tomorrow. Don't change the menu.
And that's the kind of offer that not even the SCP Foundation could refuse. They had an ultimatum before them, a cost-benefit analysis, if you will. Much like the Martindale police officers, they could try to keep the McDonald's closed, even if it meant fighting off the horrific customers to keep them at bay and potentially losing huge numbers of personnel as a result. Or worse, risk the customers looking for their fix elsewhere and causing massacres all over the state of Indiana. Or they could instead engage in controlled sacrifices. People only disappeared during McRib season, after all, and those disappearances were always esoteric enough that they could be easily written off as having non-anomalous causes. They could monitor the McDonald's and let it have its pound of flesh, metaphorically and literally speaking, without it going any further. Can you guess what they did? Due to the complex nature of SCP-6745, it's one of the rare anomalies that has both a primary and secondary containment class. The primary class being esoteric, meaning that it doesn't comfortably exist within the framework of Safe, Euclid, and Keter classes. It also has Thaumiel as its secondary class, a rare containment class reserved for anomalies that contain other anomalies. And in this case, I suppose that fits, given the role that the McDonald's plays in satiating its violent and terrifying anomalous customer base. Being one of the more recently classified anomalies on the database, its file also has risk and disruption classes. The risk in this case is danger, meaning that the physical risk it represents is significant to extreme, which any of its victims easily could have told you if they hadn't been somehow killed and transformed into sandwiches. Its disruption class is Kennic, meaning that its radius of potential normality disruption is as wide as at least an average city and could spread frighteningly quickly. SCP-6745 is another one of those anomalies where the containment methods, while effective, likely won't leave you with a feeling of comfort. For all the reasons previously discussed, the Foundation deemed closing the restaurant to be a far greater risk to normalcy than keeping it open, given the extreme violence the customers are liable to commit if their appetites aren't satisfied in a controlled manner. Foundation agents work undercover as members of the local community and law enforcement to minimize any potential breaches of containment protocols within the McDonald's building itself. During the season when the McRib is on the menu, these embedded agents are to report any unusual civilian behavior to Site-81 for recording and archival purposes. Knowledge of what goes on within SCP-6745 must be kept under wraps at all costs, including within the Foundation itself, where full knowledge of the file is restricted to Level 4 personnel and above. Anyone seen expressing a desire to tell others about SCP-6745 must be detained and treated with powerful Class C amnestics. After all, if news of the goings-on here ever go public, the Foundation certainly won't be loving it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to take a break from my Foundation duties to grab some lunch. All this research has left me craving a McRib. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-705, Militaristic Play-Doh.